Salutations, listeners and friends. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 15 of the Right Podcast. I am Elon.
I'm John.
And I'm Craig.
I'm practicing my bizarre radio voice. You know, like Ira Glass, he will pause at odd intervals when he is speaking. Like almost Shatner-esque.
Yeah.
Anyway, today we're going to be talking about how to market an ebook, and this is another episode where we will be talking about some of the more practical steps involved with marketing an ebook. A couple weeks ago, we talked about how to self-publish an ebook, and congratulations, you have done that. You followed the prompt that John gave out where you had to go self-publish a book right now. And now you're in this strange position. You have to market it. Where do you begin? Where should you put in effort? What kinds of tools are available if you want to market an ebook? What kind of costs should you be expecting? Those are the kinds of things we're going to be talking about. So to begin, I'd like to ask, and this is going to lean heavily on Craig's expertise and knowledge, what are the basic tools to use when you market an ebook?
Automatically, I would say Twitter for sure. However, I think the mandatory basic tools are dependent on what you're writing and who your target audience is. For example, if you are writing stuff that is targeted at middle-aged women, you would want to make sure that Pinterest is part of your platform. If you're marketing towards the 18 to 24-year-old age bracket, you'd probably want to make sure that Snapchat or Instagram is part of your platform. Twitter seems to be the place where everybody's a writer. So I guess I would say Twitter is your basic minimum. That's a tough question.
Mm.
And with the toughie.
Sorry, I didn't realize that it was tough.
I think there's other things that often are they're obvious but missed, and that's Goodreads, Amazon Author Central.
Yeah, sure. I would say that getting yourself set up on Amazon Author Central is a necessity. And what that does is it ties all your books to your pen name. And also you can put your bio on there, and you can put some social media information on there. So it's really handy.
It's like having an author profile, kind of.
Yes. So if someone clicks on your name and you have Author Central set up, it takes you to your Author Central page. If you don't, it takes you to a search result for your pen name. And depending on which pen name is, there might be a bunch of other junk that's in there. John mentioned Goodreads. That one I'm a little bit iffy on. Because different people have different experiences on Goodreads, and some of it's good and some of it's negative. I find Goodreads, I've not had good nor bad experiences, but I find it very clunky to use, and I just haven't quite figured it out. However, setting up a profile there, again, is like setting up an Author Central profile. It can tie all your books together. You've got your social media links and your profile picture and your bio, which is handy. I try to do that with my pen names. I haven't done it with all of them, but I've done it with some of them.
I think the point with Amazon and Goodreads is not to use those platforms, so you wouldn't use them for engagement, where you would be going in and trying to interact with readers or find readers, but like what Craig mentions, just setting up your profile. Goodreads and Amazon are the primary place where readers are going to find your book and look at reviews and stuff, and so if you have an author profile set up, they click on it, they'll come to this info, and in your bio you might have your website, you might link your blog, your Twitter, and there's now another place where potential fans or readers can find you.
That's actually that brings up, sorry to interrupt, but that brings up a question about a website. So having a destination for people to arrive at when you shout out your book on whatever platform. That's a personal website. Would you recommend having a website for your book, like a little, like a one-page landing page or something that links out to all the various places they can buy it and a summary, or would that just be kind of like too much effort? What are your thoughts on that?
I recommend an author website with a page for every book that you've written, an individual page for every book, so that you have a landing page for your book. You should try not to brand yourself around your book, because if you brand yourself around your first book and then your second book is unrelated or has a completely different name, you're starting from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
But if you brand yourself around your author name, then that's consistent. And a lot of people, and this frustrates me, use Facebook or Twitter as their in place of a website.
Mm-hmm.
That is a bad idea because one, Facebook has a real names only policy. So if someone reports you as you have a profile under your pen name and it's not your real name, Facebook can and will delete your profile, so you lose everything.
Oh.
And two, or they force you to use your real name,
Mm-hmm.
and then in which case you lose all brand association.
Yeah.
And two, you never know when a platform's going to disappear, because Vine disappeared in 2016. And if you read business news, Twitter has never turned a profit, so you never know if that's going to suddenly disappear.
Yeah, I mean, and not to continue ragging on Twitter, but the percentage of Twitter users that are bots is just like significantly higher than anyone thinks.
Yeah.
I've seen some estimates, they haven't been corroborated, but that Twitter is as high as 60% uh, either fake accounts or bot accounts,
Oh, believe it, yeah.
which is stunning, because it's such a massive platform socially and politically globally, for it to be so completely overrun with artificial accounts is remarkable. I kind of have a question. Oh, sorry, John, you look like you were about to say something.
I was just going to throw in something about what you mentioned about having a book page on your website. With author websites, I also agree that every author should have a website, ideally by your name as a domain. So, I would have bought johnrobin.com, but John Robin is a band that already has the website. If you Google johnrobin.com, you will find it. And I'd love to take that domain, but I settled for epicfantasywriter.com, which to me it serves the point. But ideally, buy your name if you can, and if it's not available, maybe try author or writer or something like that. And then for your website, it's a good idea to just make it very basic, but have an about you page that has a good author bio, have a books page. So I mean, these should be main links on your navigation menu, and that's where you can showcase your book. If you want, you can set your book page to be your home page. So that would center it. But like what Craig mentions, your website should be your author brand, not a specific book. Yeah.
So going further into the idea of the author brand, when you are an author on social media, and we covered this briefly in our episode on social media, you are creating a personal brand, and a lot of your interactions have, in order to genuinely spread interest in you as a writer, you have to be genuine. You have to be sort of a part of the community in a meaningful way. You can't just sort of blast, into the ether, just like author ideas, these are my books. Author ideas, these are my books. You have to interact, right? Is there anything that leaves a bad taste in your mouth about using those meaningful interactions and then leveraging those connections you've built to market? Like, is that weird?
I think it depends on the platform. On Twitter, I have no problem promoting myself and my books, but Twitter is sort of like known for that. So I just treat it like it's a marketing machine. For my one pen name that has a Facebook page, it's like because Facebook seems to be a place where more genuine connections happen rather than Twitter. I feel really weird about promoting myself nonstop, even though people are liking my author page because they want me to promote to them. So like, I know they want that, but I feel really weird about doing that because of how Facebook works.
Yeah, I agree. I have a page on Facebook set up for my book review blog, and I regularly contribute to it. But I've never done the sort of like bulk ask people to like my page thing. Even though I know I would get hundreds of more likes if I did that, I just don't want to be that, because I've received so many requests that I was like, fine, I'll like your page, but it won't have any real meaning. But I see very little response and growth from sharing my book reviews and my content on Facebook. I see much more response on Twitter.
Yeah, same here. Like Facebook is pretty much a dead zone for my promotion.
One thing that I do, and I've seen other authors do this for if they have a book that they're trying to promote, create a tweet that has your cover, has a link to where it's available, maybe some hashtags and a blurb, and pin it to the top of your feed. And then you don't need to be tweeting, buy my book, buy my book. It's there, and you can trust that as you interact with and engage with people on Twitter, if they wander onto your profile, and they're going to see it, and if it interests them and they want to retweet it or like it, they can go and do that. If they don't, you don't have any reason to be like bombarding your Twitter feed with promotional.
There are some authors who've built their personal brands around an ironic, constant bombardment of buy my book. And it works for them because it's tongue-in-cheek, but it also works because people are like, fine, like, to spite you, I'll buy your book. Like, I'm part of the joke. And I've actually purchased a few books by doing that. And these authors, it's very clever because they acknowledge the absurdity of it, but they also are being honest. They're like, please buy my book. This is how I want to make my living. Like, just, for you, it's one book bought. For me, it's sustaining my life. Go do it. I want to switch gears a teeny bit, because what we're talking about right now can be sort of all grouped together under the umbrella of what's called organic marketing. This is achieving connections and conversions, which is what you call sales or clicks, by an organic spread. So you're not paying to have these placements seen by people. But websites like Facebook and social networks like Twitter both offer the ability to pay for advertising placement. You can have your promoted tweets appear inside of feeds of people who don't follow you. And you can have that be an ad. I tried it with getting followers to my Twitter account. I had a tweet that was like something along the lines of weekly book reviews of all the stuff you like to read. And then I targeted people of a certain age in a certain place in the world with certain declared interests. And I actually saw some growth from that. But was it worth it? I don't know. But if you're actually advertising a book as opposed to just getting followers, that might be a different thing. Facebook also, you can have things appear in the feed next to the news feed. Even if you don't have a news feed because you've installed some kind of news feed blocker like I have, those ads will still appear, and they will be targeted much more closely because Facebook uses a lot of personal data to make sure that it's appearing before people who might have a genuine interest in your content. You can do Google AdWords. There's a lot of different platforms that are relatively inexpensive to advertise. Like for the Twitter ad, I think I showed the ad to like 3,500 people for $20 over the course of a few weeks. And that you don't get a ton of feedback from it, but that's not an overly expensive investment to try to expose people to your content. Do you guys have any opinions about paying for advertising for your self-published book?
I'm generally not a fan of paying for advertising. I would not do Google AdWords for promoting a book because people generally don't go to Google to look for a book. Facebook is potentially a good place to advertise books. Surprisingly, I think paying for advertising on Goodreads is not a good place to advertise your book. You'd think it would be because it's all about books, but the whole page is cluttered with books, and you've got a little ad that people are going to ignore. I do know that some people have had luck with Facebook ads. I've also heard people say that the purpose of the ad should be to get people to like or follow your page, so that you can continue to market to them after the ad is over. I've not had a lot of success with it. Without getting into details, I write steamier stuff, and Facebook doesn't allow you to advertise steamier stuff.
Facebook.
I've not had much opportunity.
So let's push on this idea of paid placement or perhaps negotiated placement, because as you build an author community, if you write steamier stuff, presumably you're a member of a community of people who write and read the stuff,
Mhm.
all of whom have their own platforms, blogs, accounts, etc. And so encouraging your network to assist you in marketing is also a very helpful way to get the word out, because you are leveraging other people's networks. Sure, you have overlapping followers, um, but the chances are good that if you have the ability to place your book on someone else's platform, you will get additional people you otherwise wouldn't have reached. So there are people who do things called blog tours. Are you familiar with this concept?
Yeah, I've done a few blog tours myself. So for people who don't know what a blog tour is, it's basically a book tour in electronic format. You contact a blog tour company, although you could set it up yourself. So with the blog tour company, you pay them a certain amount of money, and they set you up with, you're going to appear on these series of blogs over the course of a week or two. Sometimes, most of the time, it's just book promo, so your blurb, your cover, and your excerpt. Some of them might do reviews. Some of them might invite you to put together a post. Some of them might interview you. They're really hit or miss in my experience, because a lot of times the blog might have, say, 50 people that follow it, and so you're not getting a lot of exposure. But some of them have really powerful networks with like thousands of people. But it also depends, what is your purpose in the book tour. If it's just getting your book on the internet, that serves a purpose.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter how many people follow the blog. If your purpose is just get it all over the place,
Yeah.
you can do that.
Yeah, I think this opens up like one of the probably the one of the last major topics of promoting or marketing a book, and that is getting reviews and getting buzz going. How do you do that?
Mm-hmm.
Because things are really shifting to online methods now, not so much bookstore. Even with traditional publishers, they're leaning that way. It's about getting what they call blurbs or reviews on websites. So basically, a blurb is when you approach a blogger or an author or any other website or place that will put up an ad, and they don't have time to read your book, but they can read an excerpt and give you a brief recommendation. Many times when you see a book that's published, like a major published book, and you'll have a famous author with a quote, that's what's called a blurb. So they didn't actually read the book, but they read an excerpt and a summary, enough to get a flavor of it, and then the publisher got them to give that recommendation so that the name association will... What's this?
I've got In the Name of the Wind back here, and on the back is a quote from Ursula K. Le Guin. So that would be a...
Yeah, and like with the Name of the Wind is a great example, because if you look at the beginning, it is loaded. It's like almost every major fantasy author,
Mm-hmm.
some recommendation. Now, the thing about blurbs is you don't know whether it actually somebody read it or not. It's just it is practice that if somebody doesn't have time to actually read the book, they can write a blurb, and they are indistinguishable from reviews.
Yeah.
Well, a review being usually much longer and more detailed, but it could be like, a great epic fantasy about a personal tale of how somebody can become a legend, right? Like, and
Yeah. I mean,
make a like that, and
not to toot my own horn too heavily, but I've actually, my book review blog has grown somewhat significantly over the last couple of years, and I've been asked to blurb a few print books. And I now have a relationship with one of the big five publishers, which is very exciting, who sends me books for review. And that's having those are organizations, large organizations that have the bandwidth to reach out to any little blogger like me, and send either a digital copy or a paper copy of the book for review. But getting your book reviewed does two things. One, it allows people to find a somewhat, if not knowledgeable, then elaborate description of their impressions of your book, which is very helpful if someone we talked about reviews in the past. Reviews are super important for writers, readers. But another thing that it does, you were hinting at, Craig, which is it places the name of your book and you as an author in more places on the web. And if someone does happen to search for a book or your book or for whatever reason, the results on any search engine will be populated with more and more pieces of information about you and your book. And that gives people an impression about you. Like, oh wow, this book has been seen by a lot of people in a lot of places, as opposed to having like the result be a tweet and the following result be the Amazon page and then nothing else of relevance. That's not a lot of easily discernible quick info on the book. So I'll just briefly, as the token book blogger, I will briefly mention what I consider to be a fairly good strategy for contacting reviewers. We talked about this also in the book review episode. You should listen to it. But very quickly, find book blogs that you like, bloggers who are reviewing books that are in your genre. Send them a quick email. Every one of them has a contact page that just says, hey, this is my book, this is me, would you be interested in a review? And then attach the ebook file or an excerpt file, whichever you feel more comfortable with doing. But keep it pretty brief and personable. You don't have to be like super professional, because most of these people are just fans of books. Like, not a lot of the book review blogs out there in the world, with the exception of things like Unbound World and SF Signal. Like, those are really formal, large blogs. But these smaller bloggers are just people who love books, and so they're just enthusiastic about being contacted by an author. Generally, I know I am. So find book bloggers and book blogs that fall into your genre and category, and prepare a short pitch email and just start reaching out. Because someone will bite. I know I usually do. I've never said no to an author who sent me their book.
I think offering the option to say, would you like to review this, but then say if you don't have time to review it, if you would be willing to write a blurb, like share an excerpt. I think when you open that door, you up your chances of getting responses much more than if you just, can you review my book? Because some people might just say, I don't have time, and they won't respond. Or where some might respond and say, I don't have time to review this, but I could blurb it. So asking for both is very helpful.
Yeah, that's a really great point. In addition, so we're a little bit over time, and if my memory serves, John, you had a recommended book for marketing.
I do.
An ebook.
Yeah, it's called How to Market a Book by Joanna Penn, and it walks through a lot of what we talked about. I think it gets into a bit more depth on some of the various platform considerations, components of a author website, other marketing tools. Like, we didn't talk about newsletters. Often that's kind of pros and cons. And blogging itself, so a little bit more in-depth discussion. But what's really great about this book is you can use it as a step-by-step guide to set up a thorough author platform and a marketing plan once you decide to start self-publishing. Since everyone here has now self-published a book after our last prompt, and
yeah, we're starting a movement.
So your next prompt is to get this book and set up an author platform according to it.
There is one more thing that I want to talk about, and it's going to be another episode because I think it's too big a topic to broach now. But real world marketing, there's a whole world out there of conventions, of cafes, places people read, places people write. Do you go to a bookstore? Like, we're talking about ebooks right now, so maybe you don't go to a bookstore. But I've seen flyers for books posted at local cafes. I've seen some really clever stuff that people have done to market their book. Bookmarks with their Kickstarter on them, or bookmarks with a discount code for an Amazon book. Things like that. Really cleverly done things. So let's talk about that another time. I think it'd be very interesting to discuss. And with that, my friends, thank you again, as always, for joining me. Thank you, listeners, for joining us, and we will see you next week. We will not see you because this is an audio production, but you get the idea.